introduction to the Fraser Basin Council and our work. Then I'll talk about the Nechako Watershed Health Initiative and share some of our key findings. And we'll do a quick demonstration of an online atlas that we've developed in collaboration with the Community Mapping Network, and then we'll open it up for questions and discussion. That I'm unable to scroll ahead. Okay, technical glitch number 1.
What's wrong, Steve?
I'm unable to scroll ahead the slides.
Okay, try clicking on the screen with your mouse and pressing down.
There we go.
Okay.
That should do it. Thanks very much.
No problem.
So the Fraser Basin Council, for those of you who don't know, we are a not-for-profit, non-government organization working to advance sustainability across British Columbia with a focus on the Fraser River Basin. And we have a board of 38 different directors representing the 4 orders of Canadian government, as well as private sector and civil society. And this is a map showing the Fraser Basin and where it's situated in British Columbia. We divide the basin up into 5 subregions for our operation. It's about a quarter of British Columbia, about 2/3 of the population. And the area that we will be talking about today, the Nechako, is in this northwestern part of the river basin. The Nechako River flows from west to east. It joins the Fraser at Prince George, and then the Fraser runs south through central British Columbia and then enters the sea at Vancouver. The Fraser Basin Council, under our current 5-year strategic plan, we focus on 3 main areas: climate change and air quality, healthy watersheds and water resources, and sustainable communities and regions. And our role is typically as an educator and also as an impartial convener and facilitator to bring together different interests, different jurisdictions, different perspectives to help resolve complex multi-jurisdictional challenges. And there's a web link right there if you want to learn a little bit more about us. We've been working on the use of indicators for many years at a variety of different geographic scales. About 15 years, going back to the year 2000, we've reported on the state of the overall Fraser River Basin 4 times over that period. 3 region-specific reports on the lower mainland of BC, the Thompson region, and the upper Fraser. And we put together a lessons learned report in 2011, basically sharing some of the approaches that we've taken and the different aspects that we've learned through this work. And then most recently been focusing on the Nechako River Watershed and focusing on ecosystem health indicators. And the goal of this initiative is to develop a set of indicators that will assess the health of the Nechako watershed, identify any areas of concern, and then inform responses and decisions and actions to then address those concerns at a variety of different scales. We want this information to be helpful for government decision-making, as well as NGOs and community-based initiatives looking to advance stewardship and restoration in different parts of the watershed, but also we hope that it can inform the public more generally and how they can make decisions and manage their land or for choices to improve the health of the capital. We organized this work in 5 different of information: water quality and quantity, fish and wildlife, ecosystems, resource use and resource development, and then lastly, resource conservation and stewardship. And of course, there will also be some contextual information around the population, the communities, a bit around age demographics, some other socioeconomic indicators. But the focus is really on ecosystem health. And here are some examples. I won't read them all, but we're using a number of different indicators for each of those different themes. And I'm going to share some results and some examples from each of these, both in the written report as well as the online atlas. So the first example is looking at the Nechako River water temperature. And I neglected to mention there's quite a large dam, the Kenny Dam, on the Nechako. And then water is, and that's a lot of that water, up to 70% of the natural flow is licensed to Rio Tinto Alcan to divert directly west to the ocean for hydroelectric generation as part of their aluminum smelting. And so very significant impacts on flow and geomorphology in the Nechako River. And as part of that, there's an agreement and some targets set around ensuring minimum flows during the summer and maximum temperatures. So this graph shows the number of, and 20 degrees is the target, and that is primarily because of sockeye salmon. Warmer freshwater temperatures can have pretty significant impact on the health and survival and spawning success of salmon. So that line across the top at 20 degrees shows that threshold, and then the bars show the number of days when that threshold has been exceeded in any given year, and then the red points illustrate the maximum temperature of that year. So it does show that there's been a number of exceedances throughout this period from July 20th to August 20th, and then that has impact, as I said, on salmon. The next example is part of the multi-resource value assessment that's undertaken formerly by Ministry of Forests, now through Ministry of Forests, Lands and Natural Resource Operations. And it looks at risks to water quality, riparian areas, as well as dam level biodiversity from primarily forestry operations. And so very detailed technical analysis, but we find it helpful to sort of draw from some highlights of that analysis rather than bombard people with all of the details. So this graph shows the number of sites where monitoring was undertaken as part of this initiative, the number of sites in different status of risk. So the green is very low risk in relation to activities from resource development, low risk, moderate risk, high, and very high risk. And I'll show you the network of monitoring stations that is part of this initiative. So a bit of sort of mixed results here. Definitely some areas where there doesn't seem to be a problem, and some areas where there are some elevated levels of risk related to forestry. I should mention in this river basin and much of north central British Columbia, there's been a pretty significant outbreak of mountain pine beetle. It's a native pest species in British Columbia, but warm winters and historic pine plantations have really set the stage for this pest to essentially kill virtually all of the pine in this region. And there's been a lot of salvage logging undertaken to extract the timber value out of that dead pine before it's rocked. So very significant harvesting of trees in the area. This example shows riparian impacts from resource development activities, and the level of risk is characterized as the riparian areas are a stream function. It's not properly functioning to properly functioning. And again, it's based on a number of different sites throughout the region. And again, mixed results with respect to riparian impacts on stream function. And the last example I wanted to show has to do with agriculture, and this is part of the Census of Agriculture, so these data are available across the country, and this shows different subregions of the Nechako in two different regional districts, Fraser Fort George, areas A and C, and the Bulkley Nechako Regional District, areas C, D, E, and F. And it shows the number of farms implementing different beneficial management practices, including nutrient management, primarily manure. There's a lot of cattle, livestock in this region, riparian buffer zones, and also rotational grazing. So as I mentioned, we're putting together, that traditional indicator report that includes a mix of data and graphs and photos and stories and analysis. And for the first time, we're also trying to represent some of this information in an online atlas. It's a draft right now. We're getting near to completion, and the link is there. And I'm just going to switch gears and do a quick demo of that atlas. So this is, I mentioned, this is on the Community Mapping Network, and they've got quite a gallery of different atlases that have been developed by a range of organizations over the years. And it's been a real privilege to work with them to develop this atlas for the Nechako. So the red boundary is the boundary of our area of interest, the Nechako and Stewart rivers that flow into the Fraser at Prince George. And I'm just going to show a couple samples of map layers that are included here. I'm going to start with regional district boundaries just to illustrate one of the challenges in preparing indicators on a watershed scale is how incongruent those administrative boundaries are with watersheds. So there are two regional districts, Fraser-Fort George to the east and Bulkley-Nechako to the west. And you can just see if some of our information is organized by regional districts, it's a real challenge to create something that's representative for this watershed. Now I'm going to add a layer of municipalities and First Nations communities just to show you it's fairly sparsely populated. Prince George is certainly the urban center in this region. There are a number of small towns and a number of First Nations communities. And I will zoom in shortly to show you some of the other data, but I just wanted to start at that high level. I'll now show you the multi-resource value assessment looking at water quality. And this shows the number of different sites where that risk to water quality was assessed. And this is sediment in terms of the water quality risk, sediment related to soil erosion and runoff associated with forestry operations. And then the points are color-coded based on that level of risk. I'm just going to go fairly quickly through these just to show you a good cross-section of different data layers. Fish and wildlife. We've got pretty good information in terms of the distribution of fish. We can do that by species. The primary fish of interest in this region are the Nechako white sturgeon and also sockeye salmon. But I'm just going to list the drawing or the marker for all species. And so a pretty dense network, and this is one that I'll zoom into, but first I want to select obstacles to fish passage. Once we get that up, you'll see a fair number, but difficult to understand what's going on at this scale. So we'll zoom in, and that will adjust to the resolution to get a better sense of what's going on. So the lines indicate which water bodies and water courses are known to have a fish presence, and then those points show where there are barriers to fish passage. It could be culverts, it could be beaver dams, it could be waterfalls. And just a couple more samples, and then we'll wrap up. I'll also show the riparian impacts. So as you get closer, zoomed into the landscape, you'll see that that network of stations is not as dense, but pretty good in terms of samples of information across the landscape. And so a couple points here where there's medium risk, these yellow triangles. The orange is a high level of risk, and the green is low or very low. Got information on water licenses. By far, the single largest water license is associated with Rio Tinto Alcan, but the greatest number of water licenses are certainly domestic, so residential, and then also agricultural licenses. We've got map layers showing mines, both active and historic mines. I'll show you the fisheries registry or fisheries project registry. This is something compiled by Fisheries and Oceans Canada. It includes a mix of stewardship and restoration projects, in some cases planning, in some cases research and assessment of fish stocks. I'll switch off the other sites to make make those show up a bit clearer. And the interesting thing with the mapping is that you can see the proximity and some spatial relationships in terms of, fish presence and fish obstacles, degrees of impact, and where different community groups and government agencies have focused their stewardship efforts or their assessment efforts. Yeah, so that shows a little bit better in terms of the fisheries projects. And we're trying to update this. This is current to the, I think, early 2000s, and there's a fair bit of work that's been going on since then. So we want to add a new layer. The department is no longer maintaining that database of projects. And I think the last one I wanted to share with you is the change in forest cover. And for this, we went to a global study undertaken, I think it was the University of Maryland, and so they looked at change in forest cover on a global scale in different areas. And I'll just show you the cumulative loss of forest. Well, I'll show you the gain first in the period from 2000 to 2013. So things have been growing over that period, some replanting and natural growth. And this one will take a little bit to load up and refresh. You can also select changes in forest loss on an annual basis and then show that progression year by year. But I just thought I'd show you this one snapshot of the cumulative loss over that period from 2000 to 2013. So pretty significant in this part of the province and neighboring regions. And I think while this is refreshing, I'll stop there. I just wanted to, again, just walk you through some samples of data, some samples of results, and the online Atlas tool. So thanks, Carla. Over to you.
Thanks, Steve. That's really interesting. It looks like it's quite a bit of fun to play with, I would imagine. I'll have to log in later. And do you want to email me the link so I can share it with people?
Yeah,
the link to the site, or a little bit more information that they can have?
Sure.
Okay, and then I can post it in the chat or email to them afterwards. So now I think we'll hear from Credit Valley Conservation and Tatiana Koveshnikova. Tatiana, I will pass control over to you right now. Just a second while I do so. And I have unmuted you, so you should be audible. Do you want to just test your audio?
Sure.
Oh, there you are.
Carla. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Can you hear me and can you see it?
Yeah.
Can you see my presentation?
I can't see your presentation yet. Do you want to go to share my screen?
Okay, I have to go back.
Oh, there we go. Something's happening.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go.
Let me open the right file. Excellent.
Yep, there it is.
Okay, thanks
All
again.
Right.
And
take it away.
Yeah. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Carla, for reminding us that 2 years ago we already presented on this topic. We were just beginning and we're just bouncing back and forth some ideas about developing a set of indicators for human health and well-being in the Credit River Watershed. And the title of our presentation, if you check the link, was The Quest for Indicators. So here we are 2 years later, and I just would like to report back that the quest for indicators still continues. So I think we made really good progress. And I just want to provide very brief background information for those of you who were not able to participate 2 years ago, and talk a little bit accomplishments, what we were able to accomplish up to date. And one of the critical steps stakeholder engagement through expert workshop that we had in November 2013. And I will then turn it over to Martin Bunch from York University to actually do the demo of the mapping tool for the indicators. So again, who we are and where we are. Credit Valley Conservation, or CVC, is a community-based environmental organization dedicated to protecting, restoring, and managing natural resources in the Credit River Watershed. So we are one of the 36 conservation authorities based in Ontario. Again, as I mentioned, we are a watershed-based organization, and the population in the Credit River Watershed is approaching 1 million people, and drainage area is about 1,000 square kilometers. In terms of the land use in the watershed, you can see on this picture that the lower portion of the watershed is highly urbanized, and with upper and middle portion of the watershed, we can see more rural areas as well as more natural land cover. And just to give you, some of you who are not familiar with the area, better idea where we're located. So those are cities of Mississauga and Brampton, and this is actually part of the Greater Toronto area. So Toronto would be just to the east, right here from this area. Just maybe need a word of caution that what this presentation is not about. It's not about the watershed monitoring or biophysical monitoring. But however, the way how this project started, it was informed by the monitoring program and by all the variety of data that's been collected over the past decade or so. So at Credit Valley Conservation, we have a very comprehensive integrated watershed monitoring program, and which with more than 175 monitoring sites that measures and analyzes a variety of biophysical parameters. And you can see in this table there's a range of disciplines that are involved, and this is from anything from meteorology to terrestrial aquatic monitoring, monitoring for water quality, and a variety of indicators being measured as well. So we do have plenty of data, but we felt something was missing. And while these indicators probably will tell really good story to scientists or specialists in this area, they're not necessarily meaningful to general public or people who come and visit watershed for recreation or who work there. So we felt that we need, in addition to these biophysical indicators being measured, we need indicators that measure impact of watershed conditions on human health and well-being, and we'll speak more directly about the connection to human health and well-being. And that is being done under Ecological Goods and Services Program, or EGNS program at CVC. So idea behind this program is quite simple. We have all the different ecosystems from rivers, streams, forests, wetlands, meadows, which represent different forms of natural capital, which continuously generates ecosystem benefits, also known as ecosystem services. Anything from water storage, protection from floods, and recreation, air filtration, just to name a few. And in turn, these ecosystem benefits are critical for maintaining our health and well-being and different aspects of that. So that was the framework we adopted for making these connections from ecosystem functions and ecosystem services to different domains of human health and well-being. That was adapted from Millennium Ecosystem Assessment Study, was done back in 2005. As you can see, this framework, I'm not going to talk in detail about that, but it directly connects different types of ecosystem services to different domains or constituents of well-being, and those include security, basic material for good life, health, good social relations. So red boxes around some of those mean that some of these well-being domains, as well as ecosystem services, are more relevant to CVC mandate rather than others over which we have no authority or control. So in a nutshell, the current project is still ongoing. It's a partnership with York University, Dr. Martin Bunch and Dr. Kevin Morrison, graduate students. And the goal of this particular project is to explore and report on the relationship between watershed ecosystem health and human health and well-being. There are a few objectives, specific objectives to this project. And as you can see, those are in green that's being accomplished so far. We adapted and adjusted the framework to the project needs. Again, it's based on Millennium Ecosystem Assessment Framework. We have a short list of indicators up to date, and I'm going to talk about the process, how we got this list and how it's being applied in the mapping tool in a moment. And Martin and his team is responsible, and currently they are developing the GIS-based mapping tool that will help to show these indicators we've developed. And the few next potential steps that hopefully will be realized in the next couple of years or so, one of them including developing a set of management scenarios that will help to make this connection from CVC action in the watershed to changing conditions, environmental conditions, and then to human health and well-being. So this way we'll have the complete loop, actions affecting the conditions affecting human health and well-being. Just a few words about the workshop, expert workshop we held in November 6th, on November 6th, 2014. That was with primarily regional and municipal partners, as well as local environmental groups and some academics. The workshop had multiple objectives, but one of them was to develop a short list of indicators that will help us to demonstrate these benefits to human health and well-being using the web-based mapping tool. So again, as I mentioned, the participants had pretty much their background ranged from environmental planning, forestry, to sustainability in general and public health. And we had 4 small groups, 4 tables organized in accordance with the well-being domains, which were basically, as you can see here. We had to group a couple of them because just we felt that for some of them there would be fewer indicators than for the others. And we used appreciative inquiry process for the workshop, which basically consisted of 4 stages: a discovery, what is and what has been. At this stage, we just presented participants with the framework we adopted and informed them what's been done so far. Then the next stage was dream or what could be. So at this stage, we just asked participants to go through long list of indicators and comment on it, identify any gaps that could be, identify connections between indicators, ecosystem services, and final benefits or outcomes. So that was very broad-based type of exercise. But the next one, I just want to spend a little bit more time talking about the next stage, design of what should be. This is basically the stage at which we ask participants to come up with the short list of indicators. You see this picture at the right bottom corner of the slide, which shows a long list of indicators that were pre-identified by the project team, and also participants could add their own if they felt something was missing. So this is really a long list of potential indicators that could show the connection between environmental conditions and human health and well-being. So through the exercise of dot democracy, where participants were given 2 sets, 2 colors, 2 dots, they were given limited number, I think 20, and then they could place their dots to the indicators they felt was the most relevant and practical. So they could use all their dots for one indicator, they could use them for a variety. And then we basically counted the dots and the indicators where most of the dots were selected for the short list. So the last stage, Destiny, is basically what will be was a discussion to probe for some ideas and get some more information on shortlisted, 12, I believe, shortlisted indicators. So here they are, our preliminary indicators. So as you can see, we still ended up with using environmental proxies, biophysical measures as proxies for indicators of human health and well-being. And you can see that's quite a range, ranging from air quality to traffic, mode of transportation, land cover change, percent of canopy cover. Most of the indicators are really closely related. And as you can see towards the end, there's a range of indicators related to the green space and its use. So now percentage of people using natural space, proximity, connectivity, and accessibility of green space. So, and also as a result of the workshop, we were able to get more specific information on each shortlisted indicator. This one is for air quality index. As you can see, we asked participants to identify which ecosystems would they relate to a particular indicator, which ecosystem service we're talking about. In this case, air quality index definitely associated with air filtration as an ecosystem service, which well-being domain, it could be more than just one well-being dimension or domain. In this case, air quality index was most closely associated with health domain, and a range of other things that we ask participants to identify that would help us to populate the web-based tool. So here's the link, and I'm just going to turn it over to Martin at this point just to do the demo of the tool. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Tatiana. I just unmuted Martin, and I'm going to pass control over to him now so that he can share his desktop. So Martin, do you want to speak just so we can make sure your audio is working?
Okay, this is me.
I can hear you. Okay, so if you want to share your screen, it should be in the toolbar. Go share my screen. Oh, you know what you're doing. It's popping up already.
Well, I'm trying to do it now. Does everyone see the screen?
Yeah, I can see it, yeah.
Okay, so this is the home page of the browser that we have been working with Credit Valley Conservation on developing. The main idea of the browser is to demonstrate the relationships between ecosystem services, landscape components that generate those ecosystem services, and human health and well-being. As Tatiana mentioned, we use the framework of the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment with those 5 health domains and 4 ecosystem service categories to try and organize that. And the idea here is to engage people living in the Credit River Watershed with this relationship, the relationship between human well-being and human health and the ecosystem services that support that well-being and health. The problem being that usually when we try to do this, we either map elements that demonstrate health or we map physical components. And what we really want to focus on is the relationship, and that's sort of hard to do. So what we're trying to do, the basic concept, is to sort of give some information about the relationship and demonstrate some of the landscape components at the same time. So what I'm going to do in this brief demonstration is tell you a little bit about the functions of this watershed. I'm going to show you the back end of it, sort of underneath the hood of it, to show you what we're doing, the kind of a system that we've developed, and then demonstrate some of the functionality of that. That being the demonstration of the benefit that ties the well-being and the ecosystem services together in this system. And then also another capability of this website, which is a way for users to interact and share their own stories about their own experiences in place that connect ecosystems and watershed and landscape components with their own health and well-being. So just to start, you've got up on the screen the home page. You can see There's several components to it. There's basically a nice picture with a little bit of information that gives you an idea about what we're talking about, your health in the watershed. There's a set of menus along this gray line just underneath the title line. And you can see here the 5 health domains and 4 ecosystem services categories, and another part where you can add your own stories. And then the sort of standard, about and login kind of functions. If you go a little bit below, you can see there's 4 boxes here, and each of these has a slightly different function. These health and well-being and ecosystem services boxes simply bring the user to a web page that describes and defines those Millennium Ecosystem Assessment categories, the health domains and the ecosystem services. So it gives some people some information about that, and then a way to link from there to the actual web GIS system. This My Stories bit is a little bit of an explanation of what we're inviting people to do, and some information about how to contribute your story to the website. And this is a link to the web GIS. That's the sort of foundation of this site. And then below is sort of standard navigation kind of setup. So I'm going to go and show you these functionalities, but before I do that, I'm actually going to go in underneath the hood and show you a little bit about how the site is built, because that's, I think, a key benefit of this kind of a system. So I'm going to log in as an administrator in order to do that. Now, anybody who wants to check out the system can just access it by typing in this HTML or URL address, so cvc.juturna.ca. And Juturna, if you forget it, try to think of the Roman goddess of wells, springs, and streams. If you Google that, you'll come up with Juturna. I should tell you that this site is currently under development, so we're not quite finished. So we don't have quite all of our data prepared and quite all of the dots connected together, but it's functional enough. It's almost there in order to give you this demonstration. So logging in as administrator, I'm now logged in. You can see it tells me my username and gives me some options under my user. I'm going to go to the administrator dashboard, and just to give you a sense of what's under here, because this connects to the basic idea of the project that Tatiana just introduced. So here's a bunch of components of the system. So we have the capability to, this connects to the databases and the different components of the database that we can attach information to. So the storytelling bit is here. Indicators, the benefits that are derived from indicators, some photographs, images that we can associate with those benefits, references, and these are academic references to papers or even websites where we can provide further information to send people to the references or to back up the information that we're telling people with academic literature if we want to go that way. Now this is sort of a if you want more information kind of thing. The information that we present, we're trying to keep at a level that's accessible to the general population, and not all of them are going to want to go track down academic references. So, for example, these are the indicators that we've established in the system so far, and these come from that workshop that Tatiana presented to you that we had last November. So percent canopy cover, green spaces, impervious surfaces, for example, are indicators that came from that workshop. The thing about this sort of back end to the site is that the way we've built it is very easy to add and modify these things. So for example, we can add a new benefit just by selecting add new and providing a name, and then we can indicate those benefits or those indicators. We can associate them with some of the other information. For example, here are indicator benefits. Now, indicator benefits, the reason I'm showing you this is because these are really the key that ties together the ecosystem services and human health and well-being, right? They're an expression of the relationship. So here we have, for example, physical activity and obesity impacts on human health, right? If we wanted to edit this, we could simply go into the system, changing the names or such things, or associating it with a different indicator, or associating with a different ecosystem service. And so here you can see how we're tying together the systems, the ecosystem services and human health and well-being. So there's the well-being domains right there. If you wanted to add references, you'd add them here. And if you want to add an image, we've got an image library. You can add, upload images, and simply select images that you wanted to add. On this side, on the right, we have a description. This is an abstract, and here's a brief report that is a little bit more academic with references and such things. All this is the information that anybody with the administrator privileges can add or modify. So it's very, very flexible, and it's set up so that anybody, a system administrator, might be a graduate student assistant, right, from year to year, or could be somebody at CVC, could add, modify, change these as we go along. We don't have to go to our computer programmer in order to make changes to the system now. The same can be said about adding data, right? If you go to these uploaded file layers, we have data that can be uploaded and modified, right? So we have data, for example, playgrounds, provincial parks, municipalities, study areas from another part of our study that we did, trail networks, canopy cover, all of these kinds of things. And we can add more data and symbolize and change those through this system. All right, so that's enough of the back end. I'm going to go back into the main system. I'll just refresh this to get back there. And show you a little bit about the functionality of this system. Now, I'm not going to show you these. This is just definitions of the health and ecosystem services categories. I'm assuming most of you, if not all, are familiar with the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, so I won't bother with that. The other main functionality has to do with the WebGIS, and there's 3 ways of accessing that. You can either click on this box, and that'll bring you to the WebGIS portion of the system, or you can select from one of these menus, and it will load some of the data and bring up the WebGIS. And the same with your stories. It'll all bring you into the GIS system. So I'm going to click here on the web map and go this way for now. It'll bring up a WebGIS. This is all developed by our computer system developer, Joseph Tsao, who's a really talented guy that's been working hard on this stuff. I'm just going to explain the basic components of this WebGIS before I demonstrate some of the functionality. So here, I mean, obviously, this is the main data window, right, where you can view, for example, the Credit Valley outline here, the Credit Valley Conservation Area Authority, which corresponds to the Credit River Valley sub-watershed. And here we have loaded within that some of the administrative boundaries, the municipalities and the streams. You can do normal GIS kind of stuff with this, just like Steve's demonstration. We've got a bunch of different data loaded, and for example, you can turn some of them on and off as you like. So I'll give you an example of, for example, clusters of playgrounds within this area, and you can see in these areas they cluster together the number of playgrounds that are in these areas. As you go in, it'll break those out and get more and more detailed as you zoom in. So you can turn on and off and play with these different clusters or different data as you like. And so the user is invited to do that, and we're working on ways to present users with questions that will then draw them into exploring the data. But the very basic way of engaging these users is through these menus. And the idea here is that we want to bring people to the realization, to the information that our well-being and our health are connected to ecosystem services and our watersheds. And the way that we're thinking of doing this is offering them these ideas about health from the one end or ecosystem services from the other end, and then linking them to benefits. Now, you can access the same benefits from either menu, depending on which way you want to go into the system. So you could ask yourself, well, I'm interested in improving my well-being, and I want to do so by accessing, some part of my local environment in order to help me to do that, or understand what the relationship is between my own physical health in terms of obesity or body mass stability, and then see what information is provided. So I'll click on this, and what happens now is the system will, on the one side, load, on the right side, load data that's relevant to this particular relationship, and data that has to do with the actual benefit to human health and well-being on the left side on this information panel, with some pictures that are relevant to that as well. And so this is the abstract of this health benefit. So we're talking about green spaces being not just pleasing and activity spaces, but their sheer presence linked to levels of physical activity, stabilized body mass, weights, and those kinds of things. There's more information on this, and we're going to have a link at the bottom here to a bit longer of a report and academic references and other websites you can visit as well. We have that information, we just need to link them in. On this side, what this has brought up, for the moment anyways, we have it bringing up trail systems. So if people want to get out and walk or hike or bike, they can access it through their local trails. Now the idea is that people will want to investigate and explore their own locations as well as some others. And so you can identify a particular location by typing in a street address or a street intersection or a postal code. I'm going to type in the postal code of the Credit Valley Conservation head office. So here's their location, and it'll bring somebody into that location with the trails near that area displayed. And you can go in and find out a little bit more by bringing up the menu, the legend for those, which ones are bicycle trails, which ones are hiking trails, etc. You can do the same kind of thing accessing the system from the ecosystem services side. So for example, we have regulating services, and that might be, for example, related to reduction in respiratory ailments. So I'll click on that. Similar to the previous example, we have information that appears on the left-hand side about air pollution and its connection to human health. And this time on the right side, we brought up data on forested areas, where there are forested areas in the Credit Valley Conservation Jurisdiction, with the idea being that vegetation forests act in improving air quality. And this will happen for all of the health benefits that we have listed here. And as I showed you, and one of the reasons I wanted to show you is sort of under the hood of this thing, is that additional benefits can be easily added. If you give me the information, a data set, and maybe a couple of photos, I can put a new indicator and connect it all in about 5 minutes with this current system. There's one more functionality that I wanted to demonstrate to you, and that has to do with this idea of adding stories. So I'm going to click on the Your Stories item on the menu. There are a few that have been uploaded into this system so far, and you can see that they're located on the map because they're tied to the place the landscape component or the place that a particular ecosystem service was accessed. And they're an individual story about their experience with, with their local environment. So on the right side, we have these icons that are these stories, right? And so we can click on them to access the stories. But before I'll do that, I'll show you, the left side here, which is a little bit of information about what we're looking for, an example of a story that somebody has shared, and guidelines about how to go about sharing a story. I'm going to show you a story, and then I'll show you how to add one. So here's a story here. I just clicked on the icon, and here we have a fellow, that's contributed a story to the system, and he's titled it "Engaging Families and Youth to Preserve and Enjoy Nature." So I'll click on that link. We'll get the information in the left panel here. So this guy's name is Patrick Kelly, right? And he's sharing his work with primarily youth in environmental education. You click on that link and you get the story in a larger form. It's nice that he's wearing a Credit Valley Conservation shirt, Tatiana. I guess he does work in the CVC area. And we have a story that's formatted and uploaded as a PDF file or as an HTML file. You can choose those two formats right now, with photographs. And we have his explanation, his story of how he engages with youth to try and improve awareness and connection to local environments. And so some people can contribute and format their own stories in this way and upload them and contribute to the system. And so you can see him, he's into fly fishing, right? So he's working with youth to teach them how to fly fish. He keeps fishing rods and maintains them and brings kids out fishing. And he also works with kids to build birdhouses and put birdhouses out of doors and engages them in that kind of conservation activity as well. So that's an example of a story. In order to contribute a story, you simply select, move that, you select an icon from the drawing menu here, you locate the place where you're talking about, and you can zoom in to get a more accurate location than I'm doing. And then you're presented with a menu here. I won't go through it, but you provide a name, a few words that summarize what you're talking about. You upload a picture for this icon, and then you upload a file and provide your email. And then as soon as you press save, then you've got this icon and people can access your story. And I think I'll leave it at there. And Carla, I'm not sure if we have time for questions or not.
We can go a little over an hour. I still want to give Margot, our provocateur, a few minutes to talk about her perspective on things, and then we will do Q&A. Yeah, this often happens with the webinars. There's so much enthusiasm for the topics that we run a little bit long. So hopefully a lot of you can stay online. The recording will be available afterwards, hopefully within the next week. But I've unmuted Margot, so now she can give us her perspective, and then we will take questions. Margot, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. I hope you can hear me okay. Can you?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. And I'm going to, while you're speaking, I've created a slide, and I'm going to share just with a little bit of information on you. So go right ahead.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Carla. Well, I'm going to be very brief because I'm sure that there are a lot of questions, and I don't think there's really a need to be a provocateur in the sense that there's a lot of themes here that I'm sure people are grappling with. What I wanted to add in is just a reminder that this has been a webinar around watersheds and human health, and there's this interesting tension as we migrate our thinking from traditional environmental indicators into this idea that Martin has really been emphasizing around the connections between environment and health. So I just wanted to flag that from our experience across the country, and this is increasing internationally as well, there's growing interest internationally in whether it's watershed and health, rivers and health, catchments and health, and building indicator sets that can actually reflect that. But there's a spectrum of ways that the health sector gets involved. And at one end of the spectrum, there's just a real increase in awareness that even the traditional biophysical and some of the socioeconomic indicators that have been involved in suites of environmental indicators have profound implications for the determinants of health. And so there's been an enormous increase in understanding in recognizing that what's happening in watersheds has all these flow-on downstream implications for health and well-being. A second type of involvement, so that means that people are interested in health, people are paying attention to watershed indicators in ways that they didn't used to. There's also the idea that I think the CVC example really demonstrates of folks from the health sector, whether it's health authorities or public health units or those involved, straddling environment and health, are getting actively involved in developing indicators that explore this relationship. And not only developing the indicators, but developing the kinds of tools, such as these web-based portals that can communicate these connections. And because of that, our Network for Ecosystem Sustainability and Health and some of the work we're doing in the Nechako and in the CVC, we're collaborating really actively on building and cross-referencing some of these watershed portals, such as the ones that we saw today. But finally, and I think it's really important to remember that these ideas are also being communicated as part of much larger conversations. So they're not only happening in watersheds, they're happening in a whole variety of contexts. And I think the EcoHealth Ontario work is an example of that. The broader conversations that are happening where watersheds and catchments and rivers and waterways are just one part of those larger discussions. It has a lot of tensions around intersectoral action, and those are, in terms of the provocative pieces, there's some really interesting questions arising about who's responsible for monitoring this information, for keeping track of it, and for acknowledging what the downstream health implications are of what's happening in watersheds. So those were just a couple of ideas to fuel the discussion. I'll hand it back to you, Carla.
Okay, great. Thanks, Margot. And now we do have time for questions. A few have already come in, so I'm going to unmute all of our presenters. And the first question that came in is, thinking about the Credit Valley Conservation website, I wonder if they are able to monitor who is using their website to do queries, searches, or analyses, etc., to begin to understand if the public or intended user is in fact engaged in examining the data and thinking about the relationship between these variables. So I guess it would be Tatiana or Martin. Martin
that probably would be
that too.
Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can comment after, but yeah.
Well, we haven't started tracking that information yet. It is possible to have sort of an analytics package installed, and we'll probably be doing that once we roll this out live. That will track how many users from where they're coming. You can even get people's IP addresses. You can't necessarily get information about who it is, but more from where they are accessing the site. Where we can get that information is by asking people to tell us, if they want to volunteer that information. For example, if somebody signs up for an account, we get that information, their email address and their name and that kind of thing. So, I mean, that's one of the things that we would like to do in the next phase, is to basically evaluate how this system is being used and its efficacy. And that's something that, because we're just finishing this, we haven't rolled it out yet, we haven't yet been able to do.
Tatiana, anything to add?
No, maybe just a quick comment that it's definitely will be a useful feature to have, but as Martin noticed, we haven't got the chance to test the system yet, so it didn't go for public yet. But yeah, thanks for the hint. I think that's a very useful piece where we should be able to account for somehow.
Okay. And we have another question, also related to the Credit Valley site. He comments, this is very intriguing. Will future maps show things such as facilities that report to NPRI, and I assume you know what that acronym stands for, or other types of potential hazardous activity?
Well, it depends on the relationships that are identified to map. So, for example, I imagine in the in the category around health of freedom of choice and action, that we might have those kinds of facilities identified, as well as the location of, say, stewardship activities or ways to engage, the locations of the sites that will bring people to engage with, say, their local municipal government or with the conservation authority, or simply with, outdoors clubs, ways that people can become stewards and actually, engage themselves with the environment. So those kinds of locations of facilities can be mapped. We do currently have the locations of flood damage centers in the data set, and we're mapping those as part of this.
Okay, and I just got clarification on the NPRI, National Pollutant Release Inventory. Thank you. I know I'd heard of that before.
Can I just quickly...
Yes, yeah, please, go ahead.
Can I just quickly comment on that? So as much as we want to map as much as possible, and definitely I see the connection to air quality index, for example, and a few other indicators that we potentially want to be able to map. I think another way to go around that is that rather than duplicating what we don't want to do is to duplicate the efforts that something that is been done somewhere else and it's publicly available already. So we just may want maybe to provide a link to the actual website rather than just mapping it on our website.
Okay. Thanks, Tatiana. Next question is directed at Martin. To create your indicators in the GIS database, what data sources do you rely on, or are you collecting a lot of the data to create the map layers yourselves?
So far, we're not collecting our own data. That's a pretty big job. But the Credit Valley Conservation people have huge, amounts of data, lots of information, a very good GIS group at the Credit Valley Conservation Authority. And because this is a partner project with them, we're primarily using the data that they already have. We have acquired some other data from York Region. Canopy cover data that we've got in there right now is from them. Some data is available that we haven't got it in there yet, but we're going to be having data associated with the census, population demographics, and other characteristics that we'll be using in the next stage of this project. So it's data that's already out there. It's sources that are dependable, good data, but we haven't collected our own at this point, except for a couple of small neighborhood level surveys that we've mapped the study areas for those, but not the data.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Steve? Are you bringing in data from elsewhere or collecting some of it on your own?
Yeah, we are primarily drawing from existing data sources. The one exception would be an effort to update case studies of different stewardship activities. So we're reaching out to those organizations that we're familiar with, and through a network, the Nechako Watershed Alliance, to, I guess, profile those kinds of initiatives and activities and get coordinates to map those. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, we're drawing from quite a wide range of sources of best available existing data.
Well, it seems like there's a lot of data out there and a lot of watersheds that you can it's great. You can bring it together in one place, and to go out and collect that all yourselves would be just such an undertaking. So, yeah. So I've seen, it seems like other initiatives, that the few I've seen, do something similar. So I'm not surprised that you both are bringing data from elsewhere. Another question that just came in, are there any ideas for linking these outreach tools to financial mechanisms for actions for watershed services / restoration? I am thinking that these tools will ripen opportunity for private-public partnership for investment in conservation. Please comment. So that's, I think, to any of you.
Yeah, well, it's Steve here. I think the better information that we can bring together to identify problem areas, but also success stories, I think that can help build up a case for investing in watershed health and watershed sustainability, and it can also help to identify priorities where if there are some funds available, where would be the best places to invest in. One of the things I didn't mention is we're hoping as a next step to take this information out, both the atlas and the report, and disseminate that and engage with a wide variety of audiences, whether that's local government, stewardship groups, the public, senior government agencies, and share the information, see how these findings align with their interests and objectives and jurisdictions, and then hopefully move towards the development of a watershed strategy where we can align different efforts and where are there some common priorities and where is the greatest effort, where the most significant effort required to improve watershed health.
And if I could just follow on from Steve, he mentioned earlier on how the work in the Nechako has been developed with the input of the Nechako Watershed Alliance, which is an emerging watershed organization that is in its early stages, so quite a different entity than the CVC in terms of the CVC's infrastructure and established sort of role in watershed governance. As we know, across the country there's such a big range. So the Nechako Watershed Alliance, I think, is a really interesting example where the kind of tools that Steve and the Fraser Basin Council has starting to put together with this new phase of work, looking at indicators in the Nechako, is going to open a whole lot of other opportunities for new people to get involved. And that could be, and it already is to some degree, health dynamics. I'm at UNBC. We have a new integrated watershed research group working in the Nechako. We're going to be trying to figure out how we can align the research information that's coming together with some of the indicators work that the Fraser Basin Council has been doing. And as Steve said, informing an ongoing plan. So I think there's a new generation of activity that's building on traditional indicators, bringing together research information, bringing together stories, narratives that are, it's creating a different type of tool that I think it's kind of indicators 2.0, or maybe it's 3.0 by now, I'm not sure.
Any last comments?
Yeah, also on this, the last question, similar to Steve's response, and we're thinking that this can be a tool not just for, for our project to demonstrate these connections, but also to engage other people. And going forward, we envision in a second phase of this project that this WebGIS will be a tool to develop scenarios for management, for conservation and environmental management within the watershed. This has been an idea since the conception of the project, but it would be a second phase of it. And that means that we could engage the citizenry or private partners if there's for example, large landowners out there that might want to be engaged in the process of developing a plan for stewardship or conservation in the watershed or part of the watershed. These are all possibilities. The idea is that we're building a tool that will support that kind of initiative. And even from the question prior to that about where we get our data, you can see this idea of adding stories has a functionality that will let people, if we wanted to work a little bit more on it, add more than just stories. So it could be, for example, spill reporting, or it could be and this is something we've done with another website, water quality monitoring. So we can organize citizen science activities in the same way. And I've done this on a different website already with the water quality monitoring, using the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority's benthic macrovertebrate monitoring protocol. So these kinds of things, we now have the functionality and the tool to do. Once we have the base like we have now, it's easy to work with that to orient it towards those kinds of activities.
Okay, great. Thanks, Martin. We're at about 1:15 Central Time, 2:15 Eastern Time. So I think we're going to have to wrap things up. We've gone through all the questions that have come in. Does anyone have any last comments they want to make, or? No, hearing none, I'd like to thank everyone, this wonderful panel of presenters. You guys have made some great progress in the last 2 years. I was really impressed where you were 2 years ago, and now you have these wonderful online interactive websites. So I'm definitely really impressed. We've had some requests for slides, or I've received some requests for the slides, and both of our presenters have given clearance for me to share them. So I will be emailing them to everyone who's attended this webinar, so they can review afterwards. Also, all of the webinars are being recorded and posted on our IISD website at www.iisd.org. Whoops, I think I just muted myself there. Someone's typing. If they could just, I'm just going to mute them. Sorry, the website is www.iisd.org/video, and all of the webinars are posted on there from this year. And we're still in the process of planning season activities for the next fiscal year. This webinar marks the end of season activities for this fiscal year. So for next year, we'll let you know more details in the future as we're planning. In the meantime, I highly encourage you to join the Canadian Sustainability Indicators Network LinkedIn page. We created this online venue so that indicator practitioners could share resources with each other, ask questions, and create conversations. It's also where I post periodic news and information, in addition to emailing them out. But this is really one of the most up-to-date places that we have. So I really encourage you to use them. We wanted to create a more real-time conversation option where you can make touch with other indicator practitioners in Canada. So if you search Canadian Sustainability Indicators Network in LinkedIn, you will find it, and I will quickly approve your membership. And then, yeah, you can start some conversations. So with that, I'd like to thank all the presenters once more for some really thought-provoking presentations and conversation. And thank you to everyone for attending. It was a pleasure having you here, some great questions. And we look forward to engaging with you next time. Thank you.